Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory.
We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. If you desire to integrate this learning practically and supportively into your life, then soul-driven motherhood is your space to go deeper. Head on over to nourishingthemother.com.au or follow any of the links on our socials for soul-driven motherhood.
We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we're so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is a very special one. We are sitting with two experts, Tara Broughan and Meg McIntosh, who specialise really in the conversation around parenting and supporting neurodiverse children and their caregivers. So this is a conversation Bridgie and I are super excited to have because in the background it's one that we've personally been talking about for a number of years. So what we'd love to do is begin by giving you the background on why we have Tara and Meg here by reading you their bios so it gives you some context. And we go from there. What do you reckon, Bridgie?
Let's do it.
Okay. So Tara Broughan is a parent coach, child rights and equity consultant with a Bachelor in Public Policy and a Bachelor in Psychology. Tara is a bisexual, queer, feminist woman married to a wonderful man with two young children living in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia, on the land of the, I am really not going to do this justice, Bridgie. Do you know how to say that?
Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you.
I think. Yeah. That's my best, I think. Maybe it's Woi-wurrung. Our apologies.
With over 10 years working with human rights organisations and international aid organisations, Tara remains focused on equity, inclusion and liberation. Tara supports educators and parents and carers to understand and respond to children's perspectives in their family, identify family of origin impacts, and how to build connected and respectful relationships with children using emotion coaching and inclusive decision-making. Tara loves tackling the difficult conversations with adults and children alike. With deep compassion and high accountability, Tara collaborates with families, entrepreneurs, and schools to examine our social identities, social beliefs, norms, and systems. Together, we identify prejudice and discrimination to develop practical knowledge, skills, and systems of accountability to ensure our actions reflect our commitments to equity and justice. Tara has consulted with some of the most marginalised children and provided policy advice to government regarding children in immigration detention, discrimination of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, children with neurodiversity and disability, LGBTQIA+, kids and families, and those living in poverty. Grounded in the perspective of children, now supports organisations, state and local governments to develop systems of participation and child-led decision-making that consider the barriers marginalised children experience to participation.
And
why I love her too. She's like
yes.
Next level.
Really just such rich and diverse background, and I'm really excited to get into the conversation with both Tara and Meg. So Meg McIntosh is a paediatric occupational therapist, parent coach and educator. Meg has worked with wonderful neurodiverse and complex families across a variety of settings, both public and private, for over 12 years. She supports families to honour their strengths, develop and implement strategies to improve their family life and function. Meg approaches therapy from a systems perspective and aims to work collaboratively with families, schools, and community organisations to learn how to consider the many factors within person and without environment, occupation, culture that may be contributing to the challenges they are experiencing that affect development, learning, participation, and well-being of the many diverse people in their community. She aims to support both people and organisations to build the awareness and skills required to proactively implement positive changes that enable meaningful participation and improved connection for all. Meg knows in her heart that truly inclusive and equitable systemic changes across both small systems and large not only support those that are most in need, but also positively impacts the mental and physical health of the entire community for generations to come.
So we are very excited to get into this conversation. Is there any further context you would love to add, Bridgie, before we go?
I just would really love to invite everybody to really be as open-minded as you can about the diversity of both experience and insight that Meg and Tara offer us, and to also really put yourself in the position of the many, many families who experience parenting neurodiverse children and the lived experience of what that may be like for those families, to really open your heart and mind to that.
Well said. So without further ado, please enjoy the interview. So welcome, Tara and Meg. What an absolute delight, gift and pleasure it is to have your presence here with us in this really sacred space, having these really what we feel are sacred conversations, and where we feel it's a deep enriching to what it is that we're offering and putting out in the world, here to support all of the women and families and children as they navigate what can sometimes feel like a really hard journey. So I'd really love you both just to say hello to the beautiful listeners, and I would love for you to share that you yourselves are mothers and what has brought you together.
Hello, everyone. And I'm really honoured to be streaming into Soul-Driven Motherhood for the first podcast too. Long time member. Meg and I came together as school mums, and I feel like we've been friends forever, but it's only been a year. Both of our oldest kids started prep in the start of 2020, and I think it was actually one of the gifts of COVID was for us. My partner was away for the first 6 months of the year, so for most of lockdown, all of the first lockdown, and I'd made my goal of 2020 to build community, because we'd moved here and Esperanza was starting school, my first daughter. And so I really tried to reach out with as many mums as possible. And one of them was Meg, and it was love at first meeting with our shared passion for child rights, for listening to children, respectful relationship. And then because of COVID, we really lent on each other and were part of each other's bubble in exchanging childcare and just part of each other's support bubble.
Yeah, it's been really great.
And how many children do you have, Meg?
I have 2 children, a 6.5-year-old and a 4 and 3 months, 4 and a quarter. They like to know the ages.
Really important.
Oh, no, sorry, she's 6 and 3/4.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't she? Really?
Yeah.
Important details when you're 6 and 3/4.
Detail. She's very into details, Amy, too. Very much has to know what's going on. And Amy's my rules follower, logical one, and Lucy is my firecracker. She's got personality to boot and will push all the boundaries. But she's stunning. Yeah, they're gorgeous.
And how did the both of you come to having interest in neurodiverse children and the parenting and support of families within those relationships?
So, very early on, I volunteered for Interchange when I was only 15 and was working with children with disabilities when I was very young, and went right through uni working in the disability support field, and came out as an occupational therapist. And I've been a paediatric OT for the last nearly 12 years now. So that's my field here.
Yeah. And I come from a child rights background, so working with human rights organisations. I worked with UNICEF for about 8 years, and their primary purpose is advocating for children's rights. And part of the most marginalised groups in Australia are kids with disabilities. And I mean, for us in the work that we do, it's neurodiverse children, but it's all children who the system doesn't work for, essentially. So it could be children who have experienced trauma, could be children just with big behaviours. It could be during times in a family where it's really hard, like a new sibling comes in.
Transition periods.
Exactly. So we came together over having those conversations, and then in COVID, we were talking about all the families, and Meg was sharing with me specifically about the families who could no longer go to their therapies, attend their in-person support groups. They're parenting in often a really intense situation, and suddenly they're home all the time. They haven't got school supports. They're not seeing their therapists. Sometimes they weren't even able to get out for more than an hour a day, which isn't enough for anyone, let alone a child who might struggle with regulation. And so that's how we started talking about what can we do. And Meg told me about one of the parenting groups that she runs in person, and we decided to offer it on Zoom in COVID. And that's how we started up together.
With both of your lens on neurobiology and also child rights, did you perceive that time, in our experience, particularly in Melbourne, as a time of crisis for families, particularly because, knowing what you know, and we're going to delve into this quite a bit in terms of the additional skills that are required of parents to meet the needs of diverse kids, you would have looked at this scenario and thought, wow, like, what can we do here? Was that really a sense big for both of you, not only for your own families, but also how do we bring together these skills that we know that we've got to support these families who are no doubt struggling without the therapies that keep them going?
Yeah. Yes, I think what it really brought up for me, in still having a lot of contact with families I work with and stuff, is that it really, for some families, it was a relief. And the pull right back into their own little bubble and just focusing on that relationship and connection actually worked wonders for their little people who are normally stimulated and overwhelmed. And then for some people, they lost all the support that gave them any sort of a break and they floundered. So I think it really was a very personal thing in that respect. But it really brought to the forefront something I've been thinking about a lot recently, is that I think that a lot of our therapy system, although we're trained a bit differently from the medical system in terms of trying to be client-centred and really building independence, it's set up in a very medical way where you are booked in. There's a problem, so you're booked in for this therapist to fix it for you. Not in those, we use different terms, but it's very much the way it feels, I think. And I think what this really highlighted for me is that what we really need are therapists that are really trying to skill the people up, the parents up, to feel really confident with their own kids, and make ourselves redundant. And a lot of us talk this way, but we don't actually walk the walk. And it really, that leaves people floundering in terms of crisis if they don't really feel confident. And also just the acknowledgement that when I see someone, I love kids. I've got a lot of skills with kids. I can make a really fun session. Like, my sessions are excellent. They love them. I can make a great session where they're doing all the things that they should do to develop really well and develop core strength and endurance and their handwriting, or regulate and have fun with me, and I can emotion coach them and all that sort of stuff. But that hour a week or hour a fortnight isn't going to make the difference that parents every moment of every day and the people who are there in relationship are going to make. Like, it's really not. So I guess that's where it was. And I had a client who came through that with me who was floundering before lockdown. And in between, when I got to see a little snippet of them, we had a humongous meltdown because he was so anxious with mum, and she was just terrified. And we had a discussion about how terrified she is of his huge anger. And I said, come to this group. Let's work on this together, how we manage his emotions, because you're really struggling with this. And we did that during lockdown. And then they came back for some other support after it's all finished. And I have never seen this kid more relaxed, because mum's whole affect has changed, because she's feeling really confident and connected. And it's just huge.
Yeah, I really feel that one. I want to celebrate you both in that. It's so powerful and impactful.
I think it's one of the most it's like this, we do like around 6 to 8 weeks, but the parents coming back and saying it's transformed, like learning, getting into the meat of the actual practice of what it is to sit with emotions, because you can read the books, you can listen to the things, but when you're in an intense parenting environment where you might be still experiencing the meltdowns of a 2 or 3 year old 10 years in, or whatever your experience might be, but it's intense a lot more often for a lot longer. Yeah. You've had to just sustain the level of intensity of early childhood for a much, much longer time. And it's in the practice and the art of being like, what we can work on is like, you tell us what happened and we can reflect back to you what we hear, and we can practice. Like, we actually do role plays, which can terrify people, but we make it really safe. And, we give some good performances, don't we, of role plays, but where we can really show this is, I'll be the kid, or you be the kid and I'll be the parent and show you what we could have done. And then let's look at what happened inside your body, right? Like, what happened to you and why is, for you, which is a lot of what you ladies do as well. Like, why for you is the anger really hard, and your partner, the sadness is really hard, and how are we going to soothe those? What are the things you need to be saying to yourself all the time to help? And that work of changing the dialogue inside someone's mind as they're parenting, and then giving them really practical skills, and where we really work on, because you can think you've got it, you feel like you've got it, but it's like, but when you've got someone reflecting it back to you, and by the last groups, the other parents are feeding back to each other as well. Like, it's a collaborative space by the end of the course. Can really help people just get into the nuance of where they fall up. Like, do they jump to problem solving too early, or are they just a person who holds tension in their body because they're waiting for it to come? So we can help people figure out that thing. And that transformation can change, like nearly most of the feedback we get, they come for one child or two children often with diagnoses or a particular trauma, or from foster care, or whatever the thing might be. We're like, this has transformed all our relationships, because suddenly you're able to engage in that emotion coaching differently and better than any kind of, fortnightly meeting with an awesome time and an awesome professional, and Meg's, one of the best, but you're with them for an hour out of 2 weeks. And if the rest of the time they're in a house of really high tension, and then they're going to school and they're not able to work within the school system, then there's no amount of supports that can bolster that.
Well, I think part of the problem is a lot of the time we're working on cognitive supports. So we're trying to teach the child cognitively to manage their emotion, and really they're not there. They're down, way down here. They're down in their bodies and in the brainstem. And so, like, they'll learn all about, say, the zones of regulation and be able to tell you all about it, but in the moment it's not connected. It's not connected. They can't then just get themselves back in the green zone. So
beautiful distinction.
Yeah, so that's where sort of I have like a little bit of a problem with psychologists seeing kids by themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are they doing, really? Adults
Especially
find it hard
young
enough
children.
to change that stuff cognitively.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, we see so much more of it. There's quite an explosion of, emotional literacy and, different kinds of models, like, the traffic lights and the colours and these things that they teach in early childhood. But again, if it's not supported with, modelling and in the body mapping as well, then it doesn't really seem to be, kind of seems a little bit like lip service to something that's much bigger and needs much more embodiment, I suppose, well beyond, basic teachings to children.
I love that embodiment phrase, because that's exactly where because even with parents that we work with or teachers that think we've given feedback at our own school, that feel like they're doing it because they're saying the words and they're following the thing, but their body is like, and the kid, as the child's reading the energetic state of especially your parent who you rely on for your very survival. They are wired to listen to every message your body is sending out, far more than your words. So if we can't get into our own state of regulation and connection, or just
Oh, no, I was just going to say, if they want to ask their therapist about this, there is a newish technical term called interoception, but it's basically embodiment
or intuition.
It's basically noticing what signals are coming from your body first. You can interpret it. Yeah.
And the challenge too is that, this is these are kind of ways of thinking about children's behaviour that most parents never experienced in their own childhood, because we very quickly get socialized out of connection to our bodies. And similarly, most teachers go through training seeing a child that's sitting still as a child that's listening, whereas in fact they may actually be completely dysregulated, but they're doing the right thing, right? We've kind of got this old school of thought trying to work in bodies that actually are needing a lot more.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So what I would love to do is, Tara, you were in Honey Club with me and a group of the women who gathered on a Zoom live a couple of weeks ago, and it turned out to be a group of mums who had neurodiverse children. And because I had mentioned on the podcast I was moving through the experience of that with Lola and NDIS, and there were several mums on that conversation who were either in NDIS or in the process of NDIS, and we had this fantastic conversation which has led to, oh my God, we need to have this on the podcast to take this medicine wider. And because of that, I then put this question out to that community and said, what information would you love to hear from Tara and Meg that would be of the greatest assistance to you in your life and your experience with your neurodiverse children? And I received the most enormous amount of questions. So I'm not sure if we're going to get through them all, but if it's okay with you, I would love to segue into just hitting you up with a few questions and just seeing where the conversation takes us. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 1. How do you balance gentle and respectful parenting, teaching kids to do things due to intrinsic motivation, when the professionals are telling you to implement reward charts, homework time for repetition so they can do things when they're older, and executive functioning issues? So how do you balance intrinsic, gentle, respectful parenting with, we're supposed to be doing reward charts and repetitive structure?
Okay. So do you want to go respectful parenting first? And then I can talk about why the reward charts addressing just behaviour is way downstream. So maybe talk about that first from an emotion point of view.
Yes. I mean, the first question is that an effective way to teach them skills for the future? Probably not. And Meg can go into some more detail about that. The second one is, does this align with your values as a family? What is? Sometimes I don't even know that this is a question of balanced reward and cost. But even if it is, The professionals are going to tell you things. They're coming from a medical model, and so much of that can be so helpful and important in supporting your child. But you could go to 50 different professionals and they will all tell you different advice. We're professionals and we'll tell you one version of that. So you need to look at the professionals and services and advice you're receiving, and does this align with your values and what is most important to you as a parent? Is it most important to you that your child, at the immediate developmental moment that they're able to do these skills, that they are able to do so immediately on that minute? Or is it more important to you that they have intrinsic motivation? Is it important to you that they have a sense of, I mean, all the rewards in the world cannot developmentally move a child from where they are not. Do you know what I mean? Like, they won't, no amount of reward is going to do that. And so what does it teach them? What is this going to teach them outside of the goal, which might be to get themselves ready in the morning, let's say? So outside of that goal, what else is it teaching them about their sense when they still can't meet that expectation? What are they learning about themselves? What are they learning about the people that they're in relationship and connection with?
People think I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. I can't do what everyone else, I can't do what's expected to me.
They don't care this is hard for me.
They can't see that I'm trying. So you can balance having a stretch where you're the same as we do with any kid, where we have a reach for, we want them to be reaching for particular goals, or we want to be supporting them to develop particular skills. But they've got to be developmentally appropriate. You could get a kid to conform with some things some of the time, but they're not going to be able to do it all the time if they're not developmentally there. And the rest of the time we're teaching them something else about who they are and who we are in relationship with them. And we're teaching them to ignore their inner sense as well, which is the same with any kid, that we're using extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. It doesn't mean there's never a space for them. But as in general, do you want it to be part of does it align with your values to have it a part of a daily thing for you to help them achieve these things that they're not quite ready for? And if the answer is no, it's okay to say, thank you, that doesn't work for our family, but we won't, we're not going to be, or if you're more comfortable with nodding along and then going home and doing what you'd like to do, we don't have to. I think we're so socialized to, particularly in the medical system, to, do what the professionals tell us we have to do. And especially when we're coming from a fear place of like, God, if I don't help my kid to get as far as they can go, especially if they've got additional challenges in other contexts at school, etc., they're falling behind, and we're thinking, I've got to help my kid get as far ahead as I can. And we're coming from that fear, then of course we want to go to a professional and say, tell me what to do. How can I help this kid? And then want to do it all. But like I said, that you could receive so many different versions of that advice, and you've got to find the stuff that aligns with you and your values and what the most important lessons you want for your child are. And if that professional's advice doesn't fit with that, it's okay when it comes to behavioural stuff to say, no, thank you. Or, yeah, it does align with what I want, and that's okay too.
And it's okay to use those things. Like, how I balance it is, say, even with, I don't like neurotypical kids or kids who are meeting expectations a bit easier. I wouldn't do that with them, but, like, for example, my daughter at some point, I think she wants to stop biting her nails. So I might go, okay, well, let's try this, and maybe at the end of a month you'll get a special reward if we can. Like, I might use it that way if it's something that she is already motivated to do and just needs a little bit of extra motivation or a reminder for herself. And so, that's not going to hurt her. It's in collaboration with her. I think the problem with a lot of behavioural systems is it's put on top of. And it also often doesn't account for where the lagging skills are or what the cause of the difficulties are, the difficulties meeting expectations. So I would say I come from the lens that if a kid isn't able to meet your expectations, it's because they don't have the skills to meet your expectations at the moment. It's not a deliberate thing. It's not that they're not motivated, because you'll see even with the kids who have the most difficulties, there are some things they love doing and they're highly motivated to do that they have the skills to do. So it's there. Their intrinsic motivation is there for those things. It's not there for those things that they find incredibly challenging. Executive functioning does not improve. Like if your goal is to improve executive functioning, it does not improve by putting in place reward charts, because executive function encompasses a hell of a lot of skills. But the ones people get stuck on is that planning and organizing yourself through time. I think that's what often people boil it down to. Can they follow multiple step instructions? Can they, when they get a task, initiate and follow it through to it finishes? That's often what that is, a piece of executive function, but it's not the whole big picture. But even if we're thinking about that particular piece, from what needs to happen inside your brain, like it's a developmental skill that develops as children age, and it's only really fully developed when they're about 25. So it changes over their time and their development. And if they're delayed in that, what's happening from that perspective is that they're having difficulty picturing the outcome, being able to work backwards in their head and imagine what that task is going to entail in their head, so that they've got a picture of what's going to happen and how they're going to do it before they actually even initiate doing it. So if I tell you, so I've got an example of a 12-year-old girl who came to me with, she has diagnosis, she's an autistic girl with diagnosis of ADHD. Children with ADHD tend to have a 30% delay in executive function skills. And this kid, she's beautiful. She's got so many talents, but she couldn't get in the car and put her seatbelt on by herself without prompting. And even with, like, her mum would sit in the front go, "Oh, Max," her brother, "Oh, Max, I love the way you're sitting there with your seatbelt on and you're all ready to go." And she'd do all this like prompting. "Marley, have you forgotten anything? What do you think? Have you thought about what might be on your butt?" Like, she'd do all this prompting and had done for years. And still most of the time she couldn't put her own seatbelt on when she went out the car. So when we were talking about an executive function piece, what we were talking about is we need to get her to picture it and think about it before she gets there. So what they started doing was, when they stopped at the front door to their house to go out to the car, Mum would talk her through. So let's think about it. What are you going to look like when you're sitting in that car? "Oh, I have my phone with me and headphones." She doesn't like the noise. She's overstimulated by the noise. So she'd have her tools to help her regulate in there. And like, what else? Where will your feet be? They'll be sitting on the floor. Where will you be sitting? Behind the driver's seat. What else will be on your body? And they'd picture it all in their head first, right? And then go and do it. And then after a couple of months of doing that, she now pretty much does it without anyone saying it 90% of the time, right? Because they taught her brain the skill of what I had another mum who she has 3 children with who are autistic, and she had always used a visual schedule for the morning, and it had been really useful for them. Like, it worked beautifully, but she'd set it all up and they had to follow their visual schedule to get ready in the morning. Beautiful. You take away the visual schedule, they had no idea. So what we had to change that was, and we had to grade it because it was a lot of tasks. So we had to start with bits and pieces. But so they had to arrange their own visual schedule. So they had to picture what they had to do in their head, what they would look like when they were standing at the door ready to go to school, and then put the pictures in order of what they had to do for that end product, which is being ready to go to school. And so they're building up the skills they need to problem solve, to move through steps of the task, to do all of that. Now, if we just go, right, you're getting ready for yourself, I'll give you a star every time you're ready by this time, they don't actually have the skills to do all the steps and organize themselves through time. I like to imagine if you had like a room full of adults and you're here for a training, you have to do what I say. And what I expect you to do right now is run 5 kilometers with me. Like, you have a small percentage of them who are runners who have the skills, so they'll meet my expectation. We'll have another percentage of them who maybe play a bit of sport on the weekend, and maybe I can motivate them by saying they'll get a really great mark in this course if they come for the run with me, so they'll give it a go. And we'll have a whole other group of people who have arthritis, chronic fatigue, have never run, they've had traumatic experiences in sport before, they've got low muscle tone, they're severely anxious, they stress out when they're running near roads because they don't like the noise of the cars, like whatever it is. But I'm going to presume you're just being defiant and you don't want to do it and you're not motivated. So I'm going to send you to the principal's office every day until you do a run with me, or I'm going to make you a star chart and then you'll do the run with me, right? None of those things are going to build the skills they need to do the run.
Well said, Meg. That was really, really beautiful metaphors. That's really amazing. Thank you. Beautiful answer. May I hit you up with the next question?
Yes.
Trying to balance loving limits when you have a full-blown meltdown. So loving limits was a term, I believe it was coined by Marion. Oh, help me out.
Rose?
Marion Rose. Thank you. I just was having a total mental blank, which is a conscious parenting term that implies I put in place a limit that's no, I can't let you, whatever it is. But it's with love, and regulation would be what I would consider the definition of a loving limit. It's I love you, I'm regulated, but that's a no in however you're going to say that. So trying to balance loving limits when you have a full-blown meltdown. A child who is violently trying to hurt themselves, you, siblings, or property feels impossible. Any insight or advice would be greatly appreciated.
Tara is beautiful at explaining this, but first of all, I would say that loving limits for a child who's having a meltdown might be supporting them to be safely contained, because they can't do it themselves at the moment. They have completely flipped their lid. They have no access to their prefrontal cortex. All you can do is find the things, whether that's space, whether that's holding, whether it's minimum restraint, whatever, however you want to do it in a way that's still respectful for them. But they are out of control. And we need to protect the people around us.
Or them.
And we need to protect them as well. So
it's minimum force. So I talk about minimum force to hold safety. And in that situation where there's violence on themselves or someone else or property, it's just the minimum amount. So even in a physical hold, it's holding them firmly while they're really kicking, hitting, doing whatever the thing is, wrapping legs around if needed, but you're not being punitive. So it's still maintaining, it's still focusing. Usually if you're kids in a full meltdown, you should be putting 90% of your energy into your own regulation. He's doing the best he can. He's doing the best he can. He is suffering, and this is the only way he has to show me, I can hold this. I can hold this. And whatever the scripts you might need in your head, whatever you need to regulate, you tell yourself to help you regulate. That's where you're putting all your energy. And then when it starts to shift, when you start to feel them settle a little, you might loosen your arms a little, extend your arms out, still keep the container around them, but you might loosen your arms a bit. So it's just you're using the minimum amount that you need to keep things safe. And as that settles, or if it's not as extreme, you might be able to sit outside the room or next to them, depending on what they want. But it's creating safety and revisiting when they're back online, because we can't, again, non-punitively. So we talk a lot about setting boundaries, being really clear with our boundaries and limits, that everybody's rights get to be respected in the home. Everybody gets to feel safe in the home, but we don't need to punish someone for doing the best that they can, which is going to look different for every kid in that house.
And meltdowns aren't deliberate. They're out of control.
They've just...
I would say some kids do, because they're already in fight or flight. If they're big enough, they can get worse if you try and restrain them. And it's hard. It takes a bit of experimenting to find what's going to be okay for your family to keep them safe. I've had one mum who basically made her room relatively safe. He would trash it, but there was nothing he could break, and he would have to go into that room and he'd kind of trash her room a bit, but until he calmed down enough, and she would sit at the door saying, when you're ready, you can come back out. But because otherwise he'd punch his siblings or whatnot. And so she had to keep them safe.
And we set up for success as well. I'm thinking of another family we had recently with breaking things, like breaking electronics. They were worried about like the TV, the expensive things in the house. And when you're in a high intensity, like with the work we do, we're like, if we practice with you enough, this hopefully will come. That doesn't mean, for some kids,
they need the reset sometimes. Meltdowns will still happen, but
where we can reduce them, and we are so observant of our kids and adapting our response that hopefully it's happening far less often. We're giving them what they need to so that they stay more regulated below that space, big physical activity, whatever the things might be for that family, to this particular sensory protection, whatever the things they might need to reduce that. And then with emotion coaching over time, so that they don't feel, it's not stacked on till they blow quite so often. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but until then, setting them up for success, which does mean making some adaptations that you might not otherwise need to make for kids. It might mean putting things away in a safe place, taking the art off the wall, putting whatever the things are when you're in a really high tension. Because for some families that we're working with, we're talking teenagers who haven't been able to reach a family state of regulation for a really long time. So there's a lot of violence. They've got strong kids. And I say violence by I think about that differently coming from children who don't have the capacity to respond differently. But it's still, you have to keep everyone safe, or to really have the potential to really break, valuable things, or we need to set up some systems of success so that you can just focus on those emotions and that meltdown, rather than also thinking, oh God, the TV's going to go, or, and having a system in place with siblings. So when this happens, when when your brother is escalating to here, and siblings are very attuned, they know the signals as well as their parents do, but have an explicit conversation. When Tom is escalating, this is what starts to happen. He starts moving around really intensely, starts raising his voice. We really value what is happening for you in this family as well. When that is happening, the first priority we have is keeping everybody safe. And the best way we know how to do that right now is for you to remove yourself. That might not feel fair, and maybe it isn't, but it's the best we have right now, and I will come back to you. It might not be, depending on the circumstances. For some families, that's not going to be for a day or maybe two. So, but I will come back to have this conversation with you, but you need to go to your room and shut the door until it's safe. Because for some families, it's just having the systems in place. Even in some cases, depending on how intense things are, if one parent is extremely triggered in particular situations, and we want to build their skill to not be so triggered. But for the short term, it's that parent removing themselves from, if they can feel themselves going up, it's that parent removing themselves and leaving it with the parent that can handle that particular emotion. And reweighing the balance of who's taking on what where, like having real conversations like, well, if I'm going to be handling most of the meltdowns, I'm going to need more support here for that. It's having those conversations in your family. So it's creating those
Complainants.
Creating success. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think particularly with neurodivergent kids, we need to think about the environment and we are the main part of their environment. They're showing us that they can't adapt in a way that is helpful for them in this environment. So who are we to just keep it the same and keep asking them to do the adaptation? It's a two-way thing. And we need to make sure we're conscious of that where we can. There'll be some things we don't want to change because they're our values and our boundaries. But if you can be very conscious in how you think about it, is this something that I have to keep because that's for my well-being, or is it something that I'm just holding on to because I feel like society has told me that I'm a bad parent if I don't
it's too permissive
do this or I do this or whatever it is. It is, and being okay with making those decisions for yourself, because we're all individuals around that too. And we know our children's best of all. You truly do. No expert is going to know your kids. Not experts, professionals going to really know your kids.
Not the way you do. Yeah. All right, next question. When you have a child who doesn't stop and doesn't understand independent play, is constantly verbal, noisy, stimming. Noisily stimming? Is that a word?
Yes. Yeah, stimming.
What does that mean?
Well, it's a bit of a word that the neurodiverse community are railing up against. It's basically when neurodivergent or autistic people are developed when they were saying doing movements or things that weren't functional, they might make noises with their mouths and stuff. Whereas ultimately it does serve a function. It is helping them to regulate. It's got a function for them. But yes, that's basically these movements that maybe don't make sense to some other people, and they can be pretty intense and pretty.
So it's a form of regulation, which we all do, right? We all move our bodies in different ways that we're feeling intense, and these are just different versions,
just bigger and different versions.
And I think it is actually, just to briefly sidestep the question and say, so we're quite thoughtful about the language we use that respects the kind of neurodivergent community's identity focus on autism particularly, but on other.
We're still learning a lot, though. I was very medically trained, so I get kind of stuck sometimes. It's a lot of.
But so they consider, for example, autism is an identity, and there's a lot of pride to be taken in that community of identity, as opposed and looking at it from, which is why our ways of thinking align, because it would be the same from a human rights perspective of thinking about, who said. And if we think about a classroom's going to have, it was 25% of kids will have some form of neurodiversity or learning challenge or.
Well, it was actually the Department of Ed statistics. So it's 25% come to prep developmentally delayed. That was their language around it, but with some sort of learning difficulty.
So if we think about it from that perspective, what is the problem? Is it the 25% of children are a problem? Are they're the thing to be fixed here? Or does it tell us something about the system and the way we're considering what's right, normal? Who decides what is the normal human? And where that doesn't take away from where we need additional support in parenting children who have different forms of intensity. But that could apply for 1,000 different reasons. It's not just neurodiversity. It's looking at it from what supports does society need to put in place for families that need additional supports? What do schools need to do to serve 25% of children? I mean, what a crazy idea to think for the model to be. I mean, I think this is one of those things where the socialization we have that comes up a lot in my discrimination work, that we're so socialized so deeply to just accept things the way they are. But does that seem right, that 25% of children need to be fixed and changed. If a system's not working for a quarter of the people it's meant to be serving, then it is the system that has a problem. It is the way we are doing things, not those individual people. So, yes, so I got onto that. Or we got onto that by stimming.
Yeah, I will continue.
So the language. Sorry.
No, I really appreciate the sidestep into language, because I think it's really important for all of us to learn what's possible and what's available, and how to be able to consciously ask ourselves and consciously critique our own language, and the way in which we're viewing and perceiving the world doesn't happen until we witness that there's a larger perspective. So I really appreciate these conversations. So when you have a child who doesn't stop and doesn't understand independent play, is constantly verbally or noisily stimming, you're trying to do all the life things, it can feel so consuming. 1, self-care feels impossible. 2, I'm aware of my tone of voice and my reactions becoming his inner voice. But some days it just gets too much. Any advice in how to balance co-regulation? And I'm going to add into that self-care perhaps as well in this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
It's so intense. I feel you.
And just like to acknowledge, like I can't tell you how many times, and we do our Zoom groups in the evening, like at this time, 8 o'clock at night, and we both get on the call at 10 to 8, and sometimes the kids are still, and we're like, oh God, I'm so tired. And then by the end of the call, we're just like so invigorated, and like the deepest respect and regard and just admiration for these parents who, man, like, you know, it is.
We actually don't know, do we? Like, I actually don't think people who are not experiencing this get it.
No. And because it's not even as well, right? It's not just what you're parenting today. It's the idea you don't know how long that level of support is going to be required from you. Right?
Or has already been for how many years?
Yes. Yeah.
I even had this conversation with my husband today, and I said to him, like, you know, those times where we just feel just completely stretched in our capacity for parenting, and our kids are largely what, you know, we would term, you know, in those inverted commas, neurotypical. And sometimes I'm exhausted. Like, we cannot begin to imagine the lived experience of what we're talking about here. So that's why I'm so infinitely grateful that we have you both on the podcast to be able to share this and also offer this kind of resource and capacity to see the parents doing this work, because I don't think we see it enough and give it the reverence that it deserves.
I mean, that in and of itself is an interesting conversation. What do you two think about that in terms of it being the families and caregivers of these children are largely invisibilized in their entire experience and, dare I say, existence? Like, I mean, what do you even think about that?
It's intense, isn't it? I want to quickly respond to a few of the practicalities based on what some parents have told me. And also, it is hard because no one will really understand your predicament. I apologize to all my clients after I had kids and 4 years of sleep deprivation. So one of them about 10 years, like on and off. They kind of came when they needed something and then went, and came back and I said, I'm so sorry. I used to give you lists of shit to do. Why did you even take them? Children who didn't sleep. Why did you even take them? And she's like, it's all right, Meg. I knew you meant well and you'd get there in the end. You really don't know. So none of us will be tell you. All I can say is, I think from the people who are finding their way, and I think it's a constant finding your way, there's not an answer, is one, like, ask for help and be okay. In that situation, I think you need to be okay. You need to find someone who you can trust and use that money to get carers and stuff, and don't think it's going to be perfect necessarily for your kids' development or perfect for your kid for those 2 hours. But as long as they maintain safe and you get a bit of a break to recharge yourself and so that you've got more capacity, that is priceless. So be okay with, if you can, with finding some way, whether that's someone else paying for it or someone coming in, and you being okay with your kid being with that person so that you can have a break, because that's going to be so important for the rest of the time. So prioritize you where you can. That's critical. 2, what safety nets can you put in place to help you manage that, and what reframing do you need to do? So I work with a parent at the moment who really wants her child to be doing purposeful play. One, purposeful, I mean, how do we define that? If play is ultimately freedom and joy and self-motivated, you know, lining up cars, stimming, whatever, doing whatever you want, if that's what's happening for them, that's working for them, maybe that is purposeful play. So maybe there's a reframing that needs to happen. And then if it's noisy, are there ways to, one, set up your environment so there's a space for them and a space for you? I've got an autistic mum I know who uses special earplugs that are very discreet. They just dull things by about 10 to 20 decibels. So the screaming, when her kids get into that kind of state, she can cope better because it's just a little bit lower and she's got a little bit more space for her to manage her own feelings around that and not get overstimulated herself. It's experimenting with little things like that so that you can find that space. And it's also experimenting with, where are they most regulated? It's very interesting. Sometimes we get I've had a few parents who like sort of were a little bit afraid, or because it's so intense, their experience, they'd be in the house a lot by themselves with their kids, but getting out into nature, and when they found a few other things and other movements and other spaces that regulate them, then there was a way to get a bit of a break, or times where they got some really nice interaction and help. So it really is experimenting for different kids. And yeah, that helps a bit.
Reframe self-care as family care, because the primary caregiver getting care is care for everybody. So this idea that you're taking a little time out for yourself to serve you, to refill your cup, if you're that's for any parent, but particularly for parents of kids where there's a lot of intensity happening in the family, your self-care is family care. So however you need to get that time, take it. And what Meg said there about places of regulation and sites of mutual joy. So create sites of mutual joy where they are happy and you can be happy, like whether that's a forest walk or whether it's,
swinging on a swing
or lining up the cars while you're listening to something, or whatever the things are that where you can find the spaces if you don't have the physical capacity to be in a different place, to create the space for yourself while you're with them.
Yes, that's beautiful advice. Thank you. So that sums up part 1 of our really in-depth and we hope deeply useful conversation with neurodiverse parent experts Tara and Meg. We really hope that you have gained as much insight and wisdom out of listening to these two extraordinary women have a conversation around what is largely an invisibilized experience for a lot of parents. We hope if you yourself resonated with some of the discussions or the experiences that we shed light upon, that you felt deeply met, seen, heard, and held in that experience, and that you recognize there's support networks and places for you to go. Please touch base with Meg and Tara to support and facilitate your journey through what is a deeply challenging experience, both individually and collectively within the family unit, and certainly within our social structures and systems at large. So please make sure to connect with Meg and Tara. All of the links to connect with them are in the show notes, so please scroll on down and have a look. They are on Instagram and Facebook as @Meg and Tara. So we would love you to connect with us, nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. And Bridget is bridgetwood.life, and I'm julietenner.love. Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
And if you're ready to ask, in what ways can I show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can I mine the wisdom from the experiences of my life and expand into those challenges? Then you're a soul-driven, heart-led mama who's ready for conversations and a community that supports her journey. Come join Soul Driven Motherhood. We'd love to have you.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavour to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.